where the coach can bring real value is a coach, they've got a system that they follow. The system's been leveraged, it's been used, there's good, accountability around it and that sort of thing. You've got the time to be able to implement into it. Now, what happens is when you're walking through the predictability of the system, you can also make time for the nuance of the situational things. And so a lot of times when people hear system, they go, oh, I'm not a robot. I don't want to hire a robot. I want to hire a human being. You're like, no, you're getting both. What you're getting is you're getting a system that's been proven, keeps us on a path that's what we call RPM. So we've got those three things there. And what that does is it anchors us to be able to handle the situational things that come up. So we can go down that detour, but not get so far off that now I'm following you and you're no longer following me.
Today on the podcast, we had Scott Beebe from Business on Purpose. And fasten your seatbelt if you want to rework your business and get it ready to sell. You're going to find out all kinds of coaching tips that you need to really create a structure around your business. And grab your pen or listen to this a couple times because there's more quotes in here than a quote book that you had in college for your intro papers. Without further ado, here is Scott Beebe. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, we have a very special guest, Scott Beebe from Business on Purpose, South Carolina or North Carolina?
South Carolina, man.
All right. Well, as a year ago, this is our year anniversary podcast because I met you a year ago at my first Builder 20. You are lucky enough to be a part of the Squirrel Squad or whatever our team nickname is for 20 builders on the loose. And I was really impressed at you yourself, at your team. And I know we're bringing you back again this year for our Builder 20 meetings. And I wanted to bring you on, talk about why as business owners, we need a coach and kind of go through your thought process and all the things. So yeah, I guess like any normal interview, why don't we start with a little bit of your history? How'd you get to where you're at now?
Yeah, it's a pretty non-linear blueprint.
That's my favorite kind. Unless you're building a house. You like it to be linear when it's a house.
We tell people all the time that it's kind of the start of a bad joke. Actually, my wife and I last night watched a Nate Bargatze special. If you're not into his
He's
comedy,
so funny.
It's just hilarious. And I love his dry humor, but my start is a bit like a Nate Bargatze joke, a little bit in that I was a telemarketer, I was a theology student, I was a pastor and a drug salesman. And so you kind of merge all that together. Imagine all of those walk into a bar.
No, I can't. That's a joke. Well, how does that joke end, by the way? Are you the joke?
Well, it ends with me being a business coach. But, the back end of the joke is this, and something you and I were just talking about. And people ask, we'll get questions periodically about how do you get into business coaching and all that stuff. And we say business coaches are a lot like marketers and gypsies. The barrier to entry, very low, no certification required, right? And so the challenge is when somebody says, oh, you're a business coach, in their mind, they're going, oh, you're a business coach. And what they really think is you're a life coach or basically you're a counselor, right? And so we just hit it up front. We're like, yep, we've got the same level of credibility or certification as a gypsy and a marketing agency.
You're like a camp counselor. You're like, you sent your kids away to a camp counselor. And as you get older, you're like, wait a minute. I just sent my kids with this 22-year-old for a week in the woods.
That's right. Yeah. And my kids are those counselors, by the way. They're the ones that you send them off to. And so one of the things that we do, we don't even fight the certification thing now. We just are like, yeah, you've got to understand our chops. I've only been asked about our certification two times. Both were by other business coaches, by the way. No client has ever asked for our certifications or anything like that. And so that's sort of how the story ends. I'm giving you the very end of it, but somewhere in the middle, Ashley and I have been married almost 27 years now. I got 3 kids at the state of this podcast, 23, 21, and 20, and graduated from seminary. So I did undergrad at South Carolina, did seminary out in Texas. Graduated there in 2001, and I had been working in business as a telemarketer. Went and started in drug sales with Pfizer for a couple of years. Was having this crisis of faith and belief and conviction and all that stuff. Was trying to merge work and mission together. Faith-based background, all that, but working at Pfizer and how do these two things merge? So I had a buddy asked if I'd come on staff at a church out in Texas. So we moved from Augusta out back to Texas. Did that for about 5-6 years, both on staff. And then we also planted a church. That was part of their strategy, was to go start church from scratch. So that was sort of my first entrepreneurial experience, but a little different than for-profit. Liked about 20% of that work, of the pastoring work. I loved researching, loved studying, loved preparing, loved teaching. Every other part of it was like, if you got a lot of problems. I had one lady tell me she was sleeping on her husband with 5 different guys. I was like, just stop doing that. Like, I don't know what else to tell you, you know? And so I
That's-
couldn't, that's a true
yeah.
story, by the way. And then after that, I went back to work for Pfizer for a number of years and just sort of let myself be okay being in enterprise work. We were doing some stuff around the world with some missions agencies at the time, and that was super fun. And then about 2013 was asked if I could come on staff full time with the actually NGO that we were working with. And so I took about a year to deliberate on that in 2012, and then 2013 ended up doing that. So I did that for a couple of years, got a PhD in how to deal with a board, a nonprofit board, but that's a whole unique experience. And in February of 2015, 8 of the 9 board members resigned on the spot because of some things that they saw going on. Long story.
Did they coordinate that, where that all was like it happened like coordinated,
That
or they
day.
all
So there'd been about a
independently did?
4-month sort of sequence of emergency meetings because there was some stuff going on that I'd shown them, hey, we need to fix this, but it wasn't getting communicated clearly in the channels it was supposed to. And so when it finally came out, 8 of the 9 board members that day decided they would resign. They actually called me in and they said, hey, this is the pickle we're in. What do we do? I was like, well, you can either cut off the funding to all these projects we have going on with it. One of them was an orphanage. So like the answer to that was no, couldn't do that. Or you guys can live with it, or you can resign. But if you resign, I'm going to ask that you like dissolve my role and see if you can give me a runway or something, because I'm not going to be able to continue on. And so that afternoon, I was 39, married, 3 kids, and I did not have a job. The way that we joke, though, Mark, is my wife was a public school teacher. So don't worry about us, because we were, raking in the cash with that public school salary. And that was a Friday. I called 2 of my buddies on a Monday. I told them I was going to start a business coaching and advisory firm. They knew me. They knew a little bit about what was going on. It's really not more complicated than this. And both of them were like, yeah, man, we're cheering you on. And I was like, well, actually, I want both of you to hire me. And they were like, okay, well, what are you going to coach us on? You've never run a business. And I said, well, we need to work through your vision, your long-term vision, mission, values of the organization. And they were cool with that. I built a full-day workshop, ran them both through it. And one of the guys, still a client today, by the way, will turn 10 next month, in 3 weeks, actually. And he told me, he said, this is the most clarity I've ever had after we spent a whole day together around this. And I had a methodology for it. It's the most clarity I've ever had. What do we do now? And I said, well, I think we start meeting every week. And he goes, I'm in. How much? So, Mark, I literally just made up a number. And he knows this. He knows this whole story. And I've been meeting together ever since. And now we've got a team of 11 full-time professionals. And we serve, as of today, this recording, we serve 115 clients around the country. So about 89% are contractors or contracting support, architects, civils, designers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. There's a lot to dive into there. One of them, I guess maybe I'll start there, the pastor kind of thing. And I guess I only can relate to this. I'm curious if it relates at all. So I coached cross country running for a decade when things were slow. Like 2009, I had actually wanted to be an assistant, like a teacher. Like in Minnesota anyway, you need a teaching license when things were really slow building wise. I'm like, oh, I always wanted to work with kids. Anyway, where I'm going with this is I didn't realize how much I loved coaching until I started doing it. I always knew I liked being around kids. I liked education, but it was more just like perseverance, hard work, those types of things. I had no idea that 10 years after that. So now I would be the podcast and the collectives, and a lot of what I do now is a form of education. I guess I feel less that I personally am educating people, but more getting people together to educate themselves. And I'm curious from the pastor side of things, as you became a business coach and because a lot of the things because I've seen you share a lot of what you share, a lot of it's not rocket science. In fact, I would argue almost none of it is. A lot of it is either accountability. You hear about people that you hire a personal trainer to help you get in shape. And guess what? They tell you to don't eat as much, run more, sleep better, and you'll lose weight and you'll get fitter. And all those things are true, by the way. But sometimes you need someone else to hold you accountable. And by you paying them, you're holding yourself accountable to your own checkbook. Is that accurate a little bit in terms of coaching too? Because a lot of the things that you tell us to do, we're like, it's not like this some revelation that comes down and is ta-da, harps are being played, and we're like, man, if we'd only known that. A lot of it is probably very simple, but it's just then doing it in a structured way. Is that accurate?
Totally fair. A late mentor of mine, Dan Miller, he used to say, people come for the content, but they stay for the connection. So for instance, people hear me or one of our coaches teaching like where you first heard me, and you'll go, oh, and to your point, not a lot of it's rocket science. Like, wait, ideal weekly schedule, time blocking, all this stuff. I'm being using a little hyperbole, but The reality is that most will hear us and be like, oh yeah. And so really what it is it's not novel. It just jars you. It sobers you. So you're sobering to that reality. And you said you were a cross country coach. My son's a collegiate runner. So he's grown up in this world that you coached in. And so my son, he eats well, he sleeps well, and he runs a lot. And that's the key to the whole thing. And so what's the value of a coach? Well, if his coach wasn't there, he wouldn't eat well, he wouldn't sleep well, and he wouldn't run a lot. And so the same is true for a business. Now, I will say the one uniqueness in a business, and it's not unique. This is true in cross country running, it's true in football, it's true in backgammon, whatever. There are techniques, there are certain things that a coach can bring in the moment. Once they see and align with that particular person, they see their style and they go, oh, there's a couple things we can adjust and we can tweak. Those gives fractions of a second. Where we usually find an owner, though, Mark, they don't need the little shaves. They need wholesale shift at this point. And then we can start shaving some things down. A lot of people we meet, they actually need an ER doc. We need to put them on the table, do a little emergency surgery because some of them are bleeding cash. They're bleeding a variety of different things. We'll get them sort of stable, and then we'll start to rehab and work on those shave off things that you talk about. But yeah, most people come for the content, but they stay for the connection, or better terms, they stay for the accountability.
One thing that I think I've mentioned this to you before. We had a fractional CO a year and a half ago, and it was super helpful for about 4 months. I was unprepared for the amount of work that I needed to do myself. And I think part of it is I thought, oh man, this is great. She'll come in, and she's great, very talented. Jordan is her name. And she came in, and it was also at a very vulnerable time at the company. We had a few people turn over. So she ended up basically being my HR department, helping me hire while I'm in the middle. So it worked out really well that she was there, but it also sort of distracted from what she was there for. I was like, this is like an immediate ER fire. I need to solve this problem because this key person left. It was our controller. And until we had that fixed, it was, all hands on deck. But where I'm going with this is, I told her, as professional advice back to her, is if I was to do this again, and I've said this before on the podcast, is I wish there would be like a 30-day window before you start with a coach, where I would say like, hey, we're going to start whatever our sequence is, bi-weekly, weekly, once a month, whatever you guys like to do. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I need to go forward 3-4 months in my schedule and block out time to actually work on what you are going to tell me to do. Because the problem that I had as the recipient of this fractional CEO was we'd have these meetings and tons of ideas, lots of stuff for me to work on. I didn't have any time to actually implement any of the things. To this day, a year and a half later, I still have not. I'm sure I've implemented. Sometimes the knowledge rattles around, and I think if I was to look back, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. I'm sure some things have made their way in because it's into your psyche. But my best advice now would be to actually block out the time, not only to receive the counsel, but to have time to work on, if it's EOS, work on the rock or work on the thing. Do you find, how do you coach people through that? Am I unique in that, or is that a pretty common story?
No, not unique at all. I think there's actually two angles on this. One is the angle you're discussing, and that's the amount of time. It's ultimately a question we ask. We actually ask 6 major questions when we're first meeting somebody. The second is what you want. Like, what do you want? Most people don't ever stop to answer that question. In fact, if you stopped now and just thought about that question, you could spend an hour on that question. What do you really want?
That's the why, right? The why?
Yeah, it can fund the why. It can uncover the why. Once you find what you want, that can sometimes be powerful enough to be the why. But ultimately, for instance, what I wanted was to be able to take my wife to Morocco. That still didn't answer the why. Why did I want to do that? And so it helped me we have a tool called the why drill, literally a why, and we drill down to try to find what's way down in the earth's core of this understanding of what we're doing. We literally just taught leaders on it a couple of weeks ago. So we do that. But so what do you want? Second question, what are the roadblocks keeping you from that? Because if you want it, there's something keeping it. It could be your own apathy, a variety of things. Third question is if you don't do anything different, just like you've confessed, right? For last year, you really hadn't done much different. Just kind of keep doing the same thing. What does life look like in 3 years if you just keep doing what you're doing? People are like, oh, number one response to that question, by the way, is divorced. Literally, I'm not making that up. That's usually what people say is, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be divorced. And we're like, God, is that not powerful enough to get you moving and do something? But then this fourth question lends to what you were talking about. And that is, how much are you willing to invest? Everybody thinks we're asking about money, and we're not. We're asking about time. And so what we'll tell them is how many hours per week will you provide yourself to pull through what it is that we're having you to do? Number one response to that question, whatever it takes. We're like, it's not good enough. We're not going to let you get away with that. So we're already coaching through the initial conversation. And so we will require them to give us a number of hours. Now, we've got a range of number of hours that we have set, that we know exactly what you're going to need to do every single week to do that. So that's one side of it, is the hours per week, but you're dead on. I wouldn't say you need to look out 3 months. I think you need to look out this week and go, do you have that number of hours this week to be able to do it?
I mean,
the second side of it.
I'll just pause you there for a second. The one thing I would say about that, and maybe I don't know if it's, I guess all I can do is speak for myself. Well, next week, the week we're recording this is the week before IBS. And so I know next week is International Builder Show. I'll be back for a few days, and then I'm taking my daughter. So like right now, I'm like a month out, maybe a month and a half, because I have responsibilities. And so that I've set, and I also try to keep boundaries and some other things like that. You say 1 week and you're like, man, unless it's, I guess, just prioritizing, right? My favorite quote of 24 is boundaries create freedom. And by creating really efficient boundaries, it does create freedom, but it does make hard to add new things into your kind of solar system, because you have to prioritize your family. You have to prioritize your physical health and things like that. Otherwise you can't show up in your business. And then it's your existing clients. We always talk about wanting, or when I say most business owners are motivated by sales, and we want more. But more, your point, if your ship is sinking, going faster doesn't actually help you. You got a bunch of holes in your ship.
Sales does not solve everything, even though the URL tells you that. It's a cute phrase. It's just not true. What sales does is it exacerbates what already exists. So if you got a healthy business, sales will exacerbate the health of that business. Just like marriage, that's what marriage does. If you've got a chaotic business, sales will exacerbate the chaos in the business. So sales doesn't solve everything. Sales exacerbates what already exists.
We should go back to what you had year 6. I think you were on number 3.
So, well, you had the angle that you brought of the time in that particular week, and it's a both end. Of course, you're looking out 3, 6, 9, 12 months, but you're also looking at this week, because too many people get in the habit of going, okay, I'll get that done in 3 months. And then they burn 3 months and they go, okay, I'll get that done in 3 months. And you never get to the thing. And so you do need to look near term. But here's where I got this advice from a guy in my mastermind about 9.5 years ago. I was just doing one-off coaching with any clients I could work with, and I was sort of building it as I went. So the first 2 to 3 years, I was grabbing stuff that I was coaching on, and I was reading as much as I could, but I didn't really see a program. I'd read E-Myth years and years ago, which was a great awareness of the problem, but did not help solve the problem. And so from 15 to 18, I was building my own system of how to solve that entrepreneurial problem that people find themselves in. And so what I realized, I had a guy tell me, he said, you need to put your these things that you're coaching these guys on, in like a 4-step system. And I was like, just like make it up? He's like, yeah, just make it up. And so what I did is I took all the stuff that I've been coaching on. I was like, all right, if I could categorize these things and start to put them in. And so at first it was 4 steps to business freedom, and I kind of put some stuff there. Then it was the 4 systems of a business: marketing, sales, ops, admin. And I was like, but that's not all encompassing. That's just the systems of the business and not the business itself. And we have finally landed on a spot years into this now. And now it's full scale. It's the 4 cornerstones of every business: purpose, people, process, profits. Just happen to be P's, because I was a pastor at once, and that's what you have to do as a pastor. Put them all in the same letter: purpose, people, process, profit. So those 4 elements have got the tools underneath. And then one of those, the process, is marketing, sales, ops, admin. The reason I'm telling you that is because you've got time on this end that you mentioned. And that's one way that coaches do not serve a client, is by being upfront with them with how much time is going to be required, to your point. But the other is not having a guided system or a pathway for the client to follow. So what happens if I come in as a coach and go, hey, Mark, what ails you today? Well, guess what Mark's going to do? What ails him today is not going to ail him next week. You're going to have some new ailment next week, and then you'll have some new, and all I'm doing is following your ailments, instead of going, hey, Mark, I've been down this road hundreds of times, right? As a guide to other people. So I want you to follow me. There will be moments that we take detours that are unique situations to your scenario. And in those moments, I will evaluate as your guide whether or not we go off course for a minute, and then we're going to come right back on course. Too many coaching and advisory firms do not have a system or some sort of platform for the client to follow, where they can invest that time So there's a repetitious methodology to it. And instead, the coach just follows the client wherever they want to go. Guess what? The client's in chaos. That's why they hired the coach.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. For over 2 years now, I've been using Adaptive. It's an incredible game changer. It's AI technology based. It helps you with bill pay. And as a builder, there's very few things that anger our subs more than not being paid on time. Well, those days are gone. Not only do you know exactly where you are, but you can pay people through your ACH channels, making draws extremely quick. With one click of a button, which used to take hours, my office staff is now able to generate a draw to the bank or to the client in literally seconds. The thing that I appreciate the most about Adaptive is their ability to keep changing. We've given them 3 or 4 feedbacks on things that we need as builders, and within just a few months, they're rolling those things out. This is saving us hours per week and days per month in terms of our efficiency. If you're looking to upgrade your business, I'd highly recommend Adaptive. You can reach out to them at adaptive.com or listen to the Curious Builder podcast, episode 15 or episode 80, where we dive into their origin story. I also think that you're dealing with a lot of type A people, right? You're talking about all business
100%.
owners. And so they're used to driving the ship. They're used to, you can't be a wallflower. You have to be able to say, call a spade a spade. I mean, we need accountability. And I think it takes unique personality to create structure. They're being hired and then to remind them, like, this only works when it's a partnership. Oddly enough, it seems like most relationships or most analogies for me come down to marriage, because like marriage only works because both of you want to make it work. I used to always say that good marriages are hard. Bad marriages must be terrible because it takes a lot of work. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying relationships take work. And I, going back to more of a sales side, I think in order to be a good partner, to have a good partner, I think you need to be a good partner. I think if you want a good brand partner, you have to be a good brand partner. And someone one time said about marriage, and I'm still working on this one, but it's not 50-50. It's 100%, 100%. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective. It's probably good for me to rethink about that maybe a little bit for my own personal life as well. But, and I know we're talking in business terms, but I think like if you've reached out to a coach and you're asking for help, you've already probably done the number one thing. I need help. And I've often argued that that's probably the most underused word in the English language, or forget every language, frankly, because whether it's our ego, whether it's sometimes self-confidence is good, but sometimes self-confidence can be bad. And really, at what point do we say, I need help? And you can't be the best at everything. I mean, that's not possible unless you're MacGyver. MacGyver's good at everything.
Yeah, he's good at everything. He was also fabricated, but
well, whatever. If you don't have MacGyver, then you got Scott Beebe and his team. Anyway, walk us through people that you've seen reach out to you. What are usually some leading indicators of why someone hires a coach? And maybe I'll preface this with saying like, I've been in this for 20 years. Looking back, I'm like, man, it sure would have been nice to have a team early on of a CPA, a financial planner, your banker, a lawyer, and a coach. And often in my experience, at least looking around, and I don't think it's just me, but like the coach is the last one. If you're going to do taxes, you have to CPA. So that kind of has to happen. If you're going to have contracts drawn, you have to have a lawyer or at least have some legal counsel. You're borrowing money at some point. So all these other ones you sort of like have to have encountered. So it's natural that those are first. In your experience now, having done this for 10 years, where do you see business owners, and maybe not just construction owners, but if that's fine if it is too, but like where are you seeing the maturation process where someone is like, hey, I need a coach now? Like, why does that seem later than I would like it to be? Now in hindsight, I really wish I would have done that in year 4, not year 20.
Well, you've articulated well. So imagine this metaphor: when you're building something, typically in any municipality, you have to hire a civil to some degree. Like you've got to bring civil engineering or some sort of land planning or whatever in order to get in there. Legally, you cannot go forward without doing those things in most cases, at least going through permitting offices, all that. The permitting offices of a municipality will never go out of business as long as people are wanting to build. They have to be used. Coaches and advisors are not that way. CPAs are fundamentally that way. You don't legally have to use them, but in many cases you kind of do. Lawyers are that way in a lot of cases. And then there's descending order to insurance. You have to use it. You got to have insurance advisors. Tax strategies, you don't have to use them, but if you want to avoid paying the lump sum of what you have to pay, you got to use those. So kind of in descending order, the advisors that you're mentioning, there's some sort of compulsion to sort of have to use them, either legally or just efficiently and that sort of thing. Coaching and advising usually tends to fall more on the emotional needs side rather than the tactical needs side. And so what I'm going to do, Mark, is I'm going to give you phrases. The reason I can give you these phrases off the top of my head is because they're not on the top of my head. Our vision story is about 8 pages long. And in the client section of our vision story, so this tells our entire team what clients we're looking for. We have taken direct phrases from clients that come to us and why they come to us. And so we've got a whole list of phrases, and these are the phrases they use. People call out to us when they are tired of throwing Hail Marys all day, tired of having the wrong people on the bus, tired of feeling like more money's going out the back door than is coming in the front door, tired of seeing net income numbers but no cash, tired of doing it the way we've always done it, tired of dealing with people who don't want to work anymore, tired of chasing checks, tired of feeling reactive all the time instead of proactive. We asked one guy, how do you define chaos? And this was his literal response. I wrote it down. Monday through Friday. That was his definition of chaos. We've had others say, I'm tired of being chickens running around with our head cut off, tired of not having a life outside of business, tired of traveling with my wife to Bermuda just to change work locations. Think about that one. That's a powerful statement. Tired of being jaded and burnt, tired of doing it all myself. And so when you start to think about all this stuff, sorry, Mark, just had a call come in and it's never come in on my computer before. Hopefully you can edit that out.
It's all good.
All right. So you have all of these things. Those are why people call us, is because they have that feeling. They have that sense about themselves of, I'm tired of doing all of this. And so there's an exasperation and what I called an emotional need at that point.
Where would you say the continuum is of time in that? And I know it's different for every person, but what would be some averages of time? Like, I've been in business for X number of years, and this is when people start looking at that. Is it like when obviously what you're quoting is signs of burnout, or what? Forget signs of burnout, like of burnout, of past burnout.
Yeah.
And I know we all process things differently and have different coping mechanisms, but I guess just for what the sake of the question is like, what are average time in that? Like, how long are most of your clients been in business before they hire you?
Yeah. So again, we've got a 26 point ideal client checklist, and on there we are very particular that we don't work with people who have been in business less than 2 years. Now, you look at 2 years and be like, that doesn't seem like a long time. Well, the chaos continuum is totally independent on the person you're dealing with. Some people are knee deep in chaos 2 years in. Some people don't get exasperated by the chaos until they're 15 years in. And so it really has to do with your chaos tolerance at that point to see how long you can endure it, or better yet, how long your family can endure it before they start to implode and call you out with that sort of thing. The folks who are a little bit more chaos intolerant, they'll call us much earlier in the process because they'll realize the value of it. The folks that are more chaos tolerant, we've got a guy that this is crazy. Just met him for the first time the other day. He's in the oil and gas business, and he's 74 years old. He's the oldest client we've got by far. And they reached out at 74, and he was like, I'm tired of it. Now, part of it is like, I got to do something different. Like, this is killing me, but I'm tired of it. And so it really does depend. It's more dependent on your chaos tolerance than time necessarily.
No, that's helpful. I think one thing that I want to touch base at the end of the episode is, I know you do like not estate planning, but basically exit strategy. And I'd like to save maybe the last 10 minutes to talk about that. What's the right where I want to go with this? I think what I love about it is people are self-aware enough to ask for help. I love that. That seems to be step one. I guess maybe the first question is, how do people typically find a coach? Is it, in this case, I met you in person, or it would have been a referral? I would have asked my Builder 20 group and I would have said, hey, I'm looking for a coach. And I get called on by a lot of coaches, a lot of EOS coaches in particular. I know Minnesota has I think we have more implementers than maybe anywhere else in the country. I don't know why that is. If the author was originally from Minnesota, someone had mentioned that, and I don't think you do EOS strictly. For those not familiar with EOS, you could maybe explain it just briefly. But is it usually word of mouth, like referrals? Like, where would be your strongest source of where people reach out to you?
Yeah. So same for us. Our business started in South Carolina. So we've got a bulk of clients from the state of South Carolina and surrounding areas, Georgia, that sort of thing. So be very, very similar to an EOS, to Built to Sell, to, there's a lot of us in this space. And it should encourage all of us that are in this space, even though we're in competition. It encourages all of us that there's a need. There's a need for all of us here. It's the same reason you got multiple custom builders in one town, right? Not one can handle it all or can work with every client that's there. And we all have sort of a different niche of client that we work with as well. So for us, it's 3 to 100 employees. Clients have been in business at least 2 years. We have 2 rules. You have to do everything we ask you to do, number one. And number two, you have to have more money coming in than is going out. That's a problem that's very, very hard for a coach and advisor to be able to solve. But there are 2 primary lead channels for any coach and advisory firm. Number one, you've hit on, is direct referral, word of mouth. Now, there's also an assumption with direct referral, word of mouth, and it's just magic. It just happens. No. For the marketing hacks out there, you can absolutely work a process for how to develop word of mouth. So for instance, we can go to all of our past clients and proactively reach out to them periodically and go, hey, do you know anybody? Or are you yourself interested in coming back into the fold? That's nurturing word of mouth when we do those sorts of things. And so number 2, though, is direct education. That very thing, Mark, that you said you're good at, you like to do, getting in front of people and educating them. We've got a phrase internally that says marketing is coaching, or vice versa. Coaching is marketing. When I show up and coach a group of people and coach my brains off, I don't show up to your 20 club and start marketing from the beginning. In fact, theoretically, I never market because I'm not allowed to, and I don't want to. I came into that room to deliver as much value as I can possibly deliver. And at any 20 club or anything else, if you ever hear some sort of marketing message from me, it's because I've been directly asked by the members themselves. That's it. Outside of that, I am coaching my brains off. But the good news is that when you coach your brains off, all of a sudden you're marketing. People go, wow, that could be really helpful. And so that is probably the second most powerful channel, is either some sort of form of education and really just getting in front of people. Now, we could talk paid ads and all that kind of stuff, but what we've learned in our experience, if you're not willing to spend about 5 figures a month in paid ads, it's probably not a good strategy for whoever's going to dive into it from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, interesting. I heard something recently, I'm going to butcher his quote, I'll get that second half right, but it was like, basically there's only 2 effective ways to get people's attention: to amaze them, like wow them, or educate them. And I think, to your point, very much in line with what you were saying, that the education, I think that's probably why you see, I mean, if you look on Instagram in particular, whoever would have thought you would have seen so many builders, myself included, mic up, talking about stuff that we know, but you're like, well, most people know this stuff. But no, most people don't know this stuff. And I think there's a high level of curiosity that social media really helps deliver very well. And I think you look at like interior designers, their profiles are massive because it's very relatable. And whether you're going to remodel or design your kitchen remodel or a bathroom or a whole house or whatever, everyone can relate to that. Not everyone can relate to building a new home or even remodeling and so it's interesting how there's a lot of cons to social media, but one of the positives is it's made everyone teachers. And I think, I'm not smart enough to know what algorithm does what, but if you're passionate about what you do and you're willing to educate, people will find you that want your content. And now all of a sudden you've made yourself a valuable resource. You are, whether you wanted to admit it or not, you've become a coach just because people are listening to what you're saying.
Yeah. It's one of those things, we've got to balance all of this. I think it was Herbert Simon who said, a wealth of information leads to a poverty of attention. And so while the benefit of all of this has been a massive increase in education, us being able to do a lot of things for ourselves, frankly, the YouTube culture, that sort of thing. Shoot, we took an entire used kitchen delivery van and built a camper van out of it based on YouTube, and a lot of hard work over about 8 months because we're not contractors. And yet at the same time, we've got to be super careful because a wealth of information does breed a poverty of attention. And attention is the one asset that we can't remake. It's irrevocable. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that. Time you just can't get back. And so we've got to have, it's not a balance, maybe a rhythm is probably a better term for that, to where we are looking to learn, we're looking to grow. Where the coach can bring real value is a coach, they've got a system that they follow. The system's been leveraged, it's been used, there's good, accountability around it and that sort of thing. You've got the time to be able to implement into it. Now, what happens is when you're walking through the predictability of the system, I like that word predictability. I think there's health in that. You can also make time for the nuance of the situational things. And so a lot of times when people hear system, they go, oh, I'm not a robot. I don't want to hire a robot. I want to hire a human being. And you're like, no, you're getting both. What you're getting is you're getting a system that's been proven, keeps us on a path that's what we call RPM. You've heard me talk about that, repetition, predictability, and meaning. So we've got those 3 things there. And what that does is it anchors us to be able to handle the situational things that come up. So we can go down that detour, but not get so far off that now I'm following you and you're no longer following me. Because that's why you hired me in the first place, to guide you down this path. I I can get you on some detours, no problem, because there's a lot to learn there, both for you and me. But we're going to get right back on the path and keep going down that path.
Just thinking of this podcast, and obviously we'll have everything in the show notes so people can reach out to you to hire you as a coach or to get to that intake. But for those listening, we always try to have like 3 takeaways. And usually people are talking about their business, and we're not going to talk about specifically, I guess right now we're talking about how to run businesses and your knowledge on that. We're not going to, I guess, dive deep on how you personally run the business of, business on purpose. Although I do love the name, by the way. It's very, very
Thanks.
intentional of what it is. But I guess my question is for those listening, if they were to do 3 things this week, what would those 3 things be? How would it make a difference? And how much time should they allocate over the next month to work on the 3 things you're going to tell us? I have an idea of where you're going with this, but I'm kind of curious in your own words to say it.
Yeah, I think there's multiple things. I mean, there's multiple directions I can go. We subscribe to Gary Keller's one thing idea. I'm going to take your 3 and then I'm going to give an optional 1. So Gary Keller asked that great question. What's the one thing that by doing that one thing makes everything else easier or unnecessary? So if you could start with 3. So for instance, to run a business, it takes about 30 tools to run a business: vision, mission, values, org chart, job roles, all that stuff, right? Takes those tools. To run a product, in your case, home building or a podcast or whatever, to run a product, it takes 100, 500, 900 processes to be able to do that. And so when we think about all this stuff, we've got to think through it in terms of tools to run the business, processes to run the product. So let me start with the tools to run the business. I am convinced, and I've been convinced of this for about 9 years now, the very first place to start, go back to that simple question, what do you want, is a defined, articulated vision story. This is not a sentence. This is not a paragraph. This is multiple pages in multiple categories. So for instance, how far out is the vision? Category number 1, term. What does your family and freedom look like by that date out there? Category number 2. Category number 3, what do your financials look like? So what do you want to pull out of the business so that you can do the things that you said you wanted to do with your family and your own freedom, your time? Dan Sullivan calls them freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, and freedom of something else. Purpose, I think it is. And so, but we got to have resources to be able to have those options, right? So we go time duration, family freedom, because why are we building this business if not for that? The finances, then we get into the business, start thinking through what does the product look like? What is the team? And lest your mind goes, well, the product's building homes. Are you building $300,000 homes? You building $3 million homes? You building $30 million homes? Those are very different marketing outreaches, very different people that you'll hire, all those things. So to sit down, you asked about time, a solid hour to an hour and a half to sit down, no distractions, no phones, no nothing, just to sit down and articulate, what do I want for my family and freedom, the finances, the team, the client, the product, and the culture of this business. Well, Scott, I need more framework. No. Just go, write it. So there's number 1. That's a first option. A second option, so that was a tool to run the business. A second tool to run the business that you could sit down with is really just to sit down and go, what am I currently doing in my role? Like when I think about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we call it a delegation roadmap. Dan Sullivan calls it a unique ability. There's a bunch of people that have these different tools. And that's the thing, whether you're going with Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, you're going EOS, you're going built to sell, you're going BOP, whatever, it doesn't matter. We've all got really good tools that are there. Some of us integrate those tools a little bit differently. The question is not about the tool. The question is, will you use it? It's not, does it work? It's the same question we get all the time about software. Hey, Scott, we'll get it next week at IBS that you mentioned. Hey, Scott, is it Builder Trend? Is it Job Trend? You know what our response is? Whichever one you'll use. That's the best software for you. It's about the implementation. Edison said vision without implementation is hallucination. So we've got to be able to implement the things that we use. So the second tool I would say is what we call a delegation roadmap. It's a really fancy name for this. Write every task that you do during your role during the week. And I mean everything. If you're setting up podcast microphones, write it down. If you're taking out the trash, write it down. If you're still making bank runs, write it down. Not the big stuff, all of it.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 20 years, I've been using Pella windows, and I couldn't be happier to call them as a business partner a trade partner, and someone that really supports us in our quality builds. We use wood windows and doors on every single one of our homes, and 98% of every home that I've ever built has been a Pella window. I've gotten to know their team here locally as well as nationally, and the way that they support us as a craftsman, as well as they support our homeowners with their lifelong guarantee, has actually been a game changer for me. So when people ask me who I use, I recommend Pella. If you want to hear more about Pella's story, you can listen to episode 1, where I interview Peter and Ed from Pella Northland about their journey into the Pella ownership.
Vision story number 1,
Yep.
delegation roadmap number 2. I'm going to come back to the process roadmap here in a minute. But that delegation is a list, and you should have no less than 50 to 60 tasks on that list, because there's a lot you do you don't think about. And so we're getting you to think about it. And then we rank them a variety of ways, 1, 2, and 3. Which one only can you do? Those get the ones. There should not be many of those, maybe more than 5. Number 2 is you thought you were the only one that could do it, but yeah, you could delegate it. And number 3 is you should have delegated this a long time ago. You just didn't. If you can just start there and rank those, you will start to cull your list down, focus in on those ones and a select few 2s, and start to delegate, not abdicate, but delegate the rest of those. So that's a brain dump exercise, right? Number 1, vision story. Number 2, delegation roadmap. Number 3, both those first 2 were tools to work on the business. Now I'm going to give you processes to run the product. Number 3 is what we call a master process roadmap. Again, fancy name. All you need is a sheet of paper, 4 columns. Column number 1, marketing. Number 2, sales. Number 3, operations. Number 4, administration. That's all you got to write. And then below each one of them, set a timer for about 15 minutes and just brain dump. What is every process that happens in marketing? Website, podcast interviews, realtor outreach, architect outreach, whatever it might be. Okay, now what's every process in the sales? Well, Scott, is that estimating? I don't care where you put it. Just put it down somewhere. And so we get to estimating, we get to project pass off, we get to the sales deck, the conversion script, all that stuff. Then we get to operations. This one's going to be a big one for most of your listeners, obviously, because of the business that you're in. And so we go in operations, we go T-pole placement, we go electrical walk, how to do a can light, like all of this stuff. And you can get as macro or as micro as you want to, but just brain dump everything. And if your question is, do I put that down? Yes, just put it down for now. Because what you're trying to do is get all of these hundreds of things out of your head. Because one of the key questions we ask ourselves is, what happens to the business if something happens to you? And if you don't have this stuff out of your head, captured, that's a good word, because it could be documented on paper, it could be a video, it could be whatever, captured in some sort of recorded format. And guess what? What happens to your business, if something happens to you, is not a story that you want to know about. And so we've got to be able to do that. So 3 things. But what I would challenge, Mark, is just pick one for now. Keep the other 2 on the back burner. Pick one. And over the next 1 to 2 weeks, go to your calendar, what you were talking about earlier, set that time out there. Go to your calendar, block the time and say, come hell or high water. The phone goes away, the email goes off. Believe it or not, you can actually, that's legal in this country. You can actually turn your email off. It's no problem. You're not going to die if you do that. And then you turn off any other distractions, close your door, tell everybody else, I am not available. I am in the dental chair, metaphorically. I've got somebody's fist down my throat. You cannot talk to me right now. And you go and you sit down and just do the work. Do the work. What Seth Godin calls ship it. Just ship. Well, it's not perfect. Ship it. Just get it out.
I've mentioned this so many times. You're going to love this. His name's Caleb McDonald. He's up out of Toronto, Canada. I met him at the Contractor Coalition about 2-3 years ago. And once a month, he takes a train to a different part of Toronto. He dresses a little bit different. He, for the sake of the story, I don't know if this part is true, turns off his phone, but he basically just goes to a different coffee shop, but completely outside the norm. And he spends the day working on the business. And I have blocked it out on my calendar. I have yet to do it. This is the problem. The step 1 is knowing what to do. Step 2 is doing what it is. Inevitably, we make an excuse. The client just flew in out of town. They said, I have 2 days to meet. It's one of those days I was supposed to be planning. I'm like, I got to meet with this client. It's not really an option. They're flying in. And so like, I get that. But the problem is like, in the 4 months that I've been talking about this, I've yet to do it once. And so it is, to your point, the best process is the one that you'll do. So maybe the one day is too big. Maybe I need to take 2 hours. Maybe it's a half a day. So I think sometimes, I know for myself, I tend to get a little grandiose with ideas. Let's do the whole thing. And a lot of times I heard a great quote by Jerry Jones. Oh, no, sorry. It was Charlie Munger. I heard it today on a founder's podcast, and it was never underestimate the person that overestimates himself. And I thought that was really funny and ironic because yes, if you have too high of a self, if you think of yourself too highly, like it's prone to failure. But like a lot of entrepreneurs think too highly of themselves and they do great things. And so I just thought it was a really oxymoronic quote. So it's really got me thinking. But anyway, all these analogies, and I just love analogies. You'd be fascinating to talk to for a couple of days because the amount of quotes you've got locked in your brain, I would just want to be writing them down because it's like, ooh, that's a good one. Ooh, that's a good one. But anyway, to your point, I guess for the audience, you do something you can do. And I'm a huge fan of getting rid of distraction. I actually bought a focus clock the other day and I have mixed results using it, but I'm trying. I think a lot of it's just practice. I think how do you get better at something? I guess just try it and just keep doing it. Yeah. And so for me, I set this little timer, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and I'm trying to email less. And I have mixed results with it. I'm trying. And so part of it is just,
I'll give you one little hack on this. That's actually really helpful. And you might already be doing this internally, but this would be good for anybody listening. One way to massively cut down on email is to cut out all internal email, meaning between your team. Whoa, how are we going to communicate? Slack, Google Chat. There's a variety of different off email tools that you can get to that actually do a really good job of threading together communication. So for instance, for me to get an email from one of our team members is really bizarre, like super bizarre, because everything, and if one breaks through, somebody emails me on email, guess what? I respond on Slack. I respond to their email on Slack. And so to take your internal team, move them to a separate communication section could be really, really helpful and a good start in helping to start clean up your email so that then you can deal with the outsourced people.
I know a lot of people love it. I've always thought of more tech companies or bigger companies. We use Builder Trend, so we're communicating there. I let my PMs and a lot of those, we're interfacing with the client. Obviously, for instance, if I'm emailing the client, I'm attaching the PM, the architect, the designer. So it's like multiple people need to be on that. That's certainly not, I assume, Slack. But I guess one of the kickbacks I would imagine people would say, myself included, is how many things can we monitor? You've got text, you've got Instagram, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Slack. People start revolting against all these different technology stacks. How would you answer that question? Because I'm not disagreeing with you, but how do you get buy-in from your team? Because you've already got all these other things they're checking, and to them, you're asking them to check one more new thing.
Yeah. So I look at it a little bit differently in that I'm not asking you to add something, although you will be. What I'm trying to do is break your attention from the thing that's destroying you. On average, we spend 3 to 4 hours a day on email. It's destroying us. And actually, if you go back and look, it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who did an essay on Napoleon Bonaparte. So this is a fascinating case study. And they found out, and Napoleon, like he's a little bit more important than you and I. He was running a whole country trying to take over other countries. So I think we could all agree that he had a more powerful position than we do. And what he did is he would get mail correspondence, just like we get email, he'd get mail back in the day. And he directed his assistant not to open the mail for 3 weeks until after it came in. So if you got a piece of mail today, do not open it for 3 weeks. And he said he was amazed at the amount of issues that had resolved themselves by the time his assistant had even opened it, which means he didn't even have to look at it for the first case. And I'm going to give you another one. This is good. Peter Drucker. Like, we can't argue with Peter Drucker. And so
I don't
Peter
even know who
Drucker
that is. Who's Peter Drucker?
The great father of modern management. I mean, wrote all these great books in the 90s and all this stuff. So Peter Drucker comes and he's asked by another author, hey, can I interview you? You're super creative in how you come up with things. I mean, he wrote the books on management. And can I interview about creativity? And here was Drucker's response. He said, I'm sorry, I have to disappoint you. I could not possibly answer your questions. While I'm told I'm creative, I don't really know what that means. Peter Drucker's brilliant, by the way. I'm told I'm creative. I don't really know what that means. I just keep on plotting. I hope that you will not think me presumptuous or rude if I say that one of the secrets of productivity is to have a very big waste paper basket to take care of all invitations such as yours. What's the takeaway? We're not that important, but we sit on email and all of these other channels like the world is depending on us. No, the reality is if you only had 1 hour a day where your email was even accessible, guess what? You'd get it all done. It's Parkinson's law. Work expands the time allotted. If you allot 6 hours a day for email, you'll take it. If you allot 1 hour a day for email, you'll take it. If you allot 15 minutes a day for email, you'll take it. And so email, we have a saying internally, well, externally too, that email is from the devil. We sort of believe that being true. The reality is we're using email for far more than it was ever intended. All it was intended to do was take something we meant to mail by the mail, but we could digitize it and just send it to you. It was never intended to be a direct messaging, a workflow process, on a modern day Asana, nothing like that. And so we've got to be really, really careful of how we do that.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like we should, honestly, if you'd be open to it, do you think you could do a whole podcast just on how to stop doing emails?
Yeah, I would waylay that tool if I could. Yes. I would
I would
be
love to bring
happy.
you on and actually talk about that, about
Yeah.
like steps of how to, and
Yeah.
honestly, self-help for myself. I have found, and I think like right now we have 2 out-of-state clients and they're big projects, interviewing architects. And first of all, I love interviewing architects. I love interviewing designers. I get way more enjoyment. Like, who likes to sit there and write emails? I think we feel like we have to.
Yeah.
In one of these old quotes that I recycle a lot, which is, one of the best ways to get less email is to email less.
Send less
So,
email. Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
into that Napoleon story is epic, 3 weeks. But it's interesting because I'm sure a lot of business owners would like to think of themselves as good communicators. I know I do. And I prioritize good communication. So it is frustrating when you email people and you never hear back from them again.
Yeah.
I find it very irritating, frankly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like for me, it's a little bit of hypocrisy. If I'm expecting people to answer me, but I don't answer them. And you mentioned you were a telemarketer. I was in sales. I had a job for 1 year between college and what I do now. And I cold called 100 people. So I have a kind of a soft spot in my heart for people that call me. I usually will call them back, or now I finally set up templates in my email where, and I don't want to be disrespectful. I understand that I have to get this, probably a me thing. Like I just have such a complex. People have asked me a question. I feel like I owe them a response. I understand that I don't owe them a response. And I know that's probably a personal thing. And yet, so I kind of have hybrid approached it, which I have a template, which I can in 3 seconds hit a reply button. It sends them back a message. Actually, I have my template. You'll love this. I'm going to resell them the cell. So they reach out to me saying, "Hey, I'd love to be your roofer." And I'll send them a cell saying, like, "We're really happy with our roofer. By the way, do you know we have a podcast called The Curious Builder? If you'd like to tune in, here's the link."
Yeah.
And I'm being serious with it. And they usually say,
Yeah.
"Oh, thanks. That's great." And that's fine. I don't know. How do you undo this communication cycle? Because I agree with you. We spend too much time on it. And yet I feel, how do you get rid of the hypocritical feeling that we expect other people to answer us, but we don't answer them?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it doesn't mean you don't answer them. What it does mean is you retrain people as to what your priority of answering is. For instance, for me, if somebody wants a response from me, the fastest way to get to me is to get to me. Let's talk face to face. Now, some people will go, "Well, that's not realistic." Okay, that's fair. But I'm just telling you, that's number one. Is if we see each other at IBS, we see each other at a 20 club, we see, like, that's the fastest way to get insight, response, whatever, if you want that from me. And vice versa, I think if I want that from you, that's the same. All right, so there's number one. Number two fastest way is you get to my wife or one of our key team members. And in business or in life, or my kids, like in business or in life, second fastest way to me, outside of directly to me, is through these people that I deeply, deeply care about. Third, if you want to get to me, then you find those technologies that are closest to me. Email is not closest to me. Text message is closest to me. And the longer you get to know me, the longer you realize Scott's a texter. We all have that. We know that about people, right? I could ask you about your sister's husband and you could go, "Nope, not a texter, not an emailer, phone caller," right? We've
100%.
categorized all these people.
100%.
And so when we start to look at that, we go, okay, but we treat everybody as if they should respond to email. But there's a definition of email. I think Cal Newport put this out. Email is my agenda for your day. So why would I do that? Why would I go into email to find out what you want me to do? The reality is, I feel like I've got a calling in my work. I've got a calling from the God who created me to liberate owners from chaos, to make time for what matters most. There have been other people who have callings. A guy named Bezalel 3,500 years ago had a calling to be a craftsman, to make these tents and all of these beautiful, wonderful things. It literally says the Spirit of God was in him to create and to craft things. So we all have a unique placement into what we're being called to do. What I cannot do is I cannot tolerate people who don't have a calling and are just stringing throughout their day to chaotically get in front of the calling that I feel like I have. Because if you do that, then what's happening is you're getting in the way of this. So I'll give you an example. Next week, I speak a couple times at International Builder Show. If I had slaved myself to your agenda, email, all these other things, then I would not be prepared. So when I show up and there's 40 people in a room or 150 people in a room or another 80 people in the room or whatever, now I have robbed a cumulative 200 to 300 people of the prior work that goes into their time and attention that they invested in. And so when I'm sitting down working on my talks, people go, well, Scott, you're not in a meeting. I'm not. I've got 200 people sitting in front of me. Now, they're not in front of me right now, but they're going to be. And I've got to be ready for that. So, yes, you see me here with nobody in front of me, but I am in a meeting at this point. And so it's starting to reframe what work looks like and what meetings look like and what productivity looks like. And so you can have open block hours, and I've got some of those when I'm in the office. But our office in South Carolina, I don't even have a desk in it. Why? It's because I can't get anything done there. When I'm up there, it's hey, can I pick your brain? And as much as I want my brain to be picked, I'm now robbing other people of what I've committed to. And the good news is people will go, hey, well, when do your team get to pick your brain? Monday at 4, Tuesday at 8, Friday at 10. We have 3 set times every single week where if somebody needs something from me, from Thomas, from Ashley, from Jesse, whatever, there's our place. So we don't have to interrupt
what
each
I like
other.
about that, I suspect that your team is, what you said, 11 people?
Yeah.
And if Ashley has a question, Bob or Mark, that question is you're using a team approach to teach multiple people. It's a force multiplier. Now, multiple questions, and people sometimes ask questions that someone else will ask a question that they didn't know they have, but it sort of is the answer to the one that they thought that, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I like that. 3 times a week,
Napoleon said, save it for 3 weeks. Why? Is because naturally it gets solved. And so if my answer, this is another key element, Mark, when people pick my brain about something, what I'm giving them is an answer, not necessarily the answer. As the owner of the business, for a long time, I thought it was the answer. Like, it's kind of, my business and sort of the answer. And then we started doing coaches meetings, started that years ago, and finally had somebody who appreciates me and loves me enough to tell me the truth and goes, hey, can you stop talking so much in these meetings? And I was like, yeah, but like I'm a wealth of knowledge. And they're like, no, you're an interruption is what you are. And so I would sit back in these meetings and guess what? The information, the insight that they brought, I was like, I've never seen that. See, our meeting on Monday at 4 is our coaches meeting. It's where our coaches all get together in a round table every week, 50 times a year. And they talk about their clients behind their back. That's the whole point of it, is so that we can get together and go, hey, I ran into this situation. How would you guys handle that? This is how I handled it, but how would you guys? And so we're going in. The more I started listening instead of interjecting, the more I started learning from it. And so being able to position ourselves, when I remove my access, I'm actually not robbing other people of developing their acumen at that point. Now, can you remove it too much? Of course you can. But that's where predictability comes in. And we go, hey, these are the places where if you need my access, ask for it. But outside of this, let's be really, really careful about, hey, can I pick your brain? Not just for me, everybody, that we've got to be careful with that.
Interesting. Well, I got 1,000 more questions, but we'll have to save that for another time. We're almost out. One of the things that I said we'd talk a little bit about it. And I know you don't agree with this, so that's why I'm going to let you defend it. A lot of people say that you can't sell custom home companies. It's too messy. It's too unpredictable. And I guess I already know the answer a little bit because I've heard you speak on it. Give us the counter to that. Why is that a common thing that people think? And then tell us how to fix that. Because it was an eye-opening experience for me. 2-3 years ago, we rebranded the company, and I looked very deeply into changing the name of my company. I wish I had not named it Mark Williams Custom Homes because it's my name. But then I realized, like, you could name it anything you want. Doesn't make it more sellable or less sellable. It turns out you got to have a process. And, I guess the classic line is if you leave your business for a month and it can't run, you don't have a business. You have a job. And right now, I have a job. But at least now I know I have a job, and now I'm really excited. Before I always was I didn't want to scale because I don't, want to quote get big or any of those things. But ultimately, you want to buy back your time. That I'm very interested in. I just didn't realize that the way to get there was to put systems in place. So anyway, with that in mind, how does somebody, let's say in my shoes, how do you lay out the future so your business is sellable? Because I know like today, right now, there's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. And I don't know what percentage of the country's ownership is in those 10,000, but I would suspect a lot.
A
And
lot.
I heard some crazy stat that only like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 businesses actually get sold. The rest just shut down. And you
Yeah.
think about this, man, 20, 30, 40 years, however God long, you've got blessed to work here. It is kind of discouraging to think that you'd put that much time into something and it's not worth anything
Yeah.
because you didn't make it worth anything. It may have
Yeah.
been worth a lot to you. So I know we're leaving very little time to on a very important topic here, but what are the steps that people need to take so that their business is sellable, so that what they've done, and I'm less personally concerned about legacy. I'm more concerned about like, this is an asset. Like I've
Yeah.
created a brand.
Yeah.
Why can't I sell it? And why is that out there?
Yeah. You mentioned two adjectives earlier. One was messy. I forget the other one. You were talking about a messy business. Maybe the other one was something like a chaotic business. And a lot of businesses are messy and chaotic. You can sell any business. Any business. Why? It's because if somebody buys it, technically you sell it. It's just like real estate, right? And the old phrase of how much is your house worth? Whatever the other person will buy it, pay for it. Well, the same is true for your business. Well, I should demand a 4 times multiple. Yeah, by standards, by Zillow, your house should sell for 800 grand. But if somebody's not going to buy it for that, then it's not worth that. Same exact principle it is for business. Is you could have your EBITDA numbers. You look at industry multiples that you can just find online for the most part, and you can make an assessment based on your net income. Now you got to have recast financials and all this stuff. I won't go into all that. But the reality is, the reason a business typically doesn't sell in the custom home building business is not because it's named Mark Williams Custom Homes. It's because the business is fully dependent on Mark Williams. And so I used to work for a company called Pfizer. What was that? Charles Pfizer. That thing has grown to a multi-billion-dollar company. That guy's been dead for 100 years. And so I don't care what you name the business. What I care about is that the business can run without Charles Pfizer. And so 2023, I got done speaking at a Build Expo in Houston, Texas in June 30th, I think it was. I got off the little stage. It wasn't big, 100 people, something like that. Got off the stage. I had a bag right over here. My wife was right over there with her bag. Brandon, one of our coaches, was there. He was meeting everybody and saying hello and following up and doing all that kind of stuff. And I went into the bathroom, janky, dirty bathroom, got changed. And I met my wife out. We waved at Brandon and we went to the airport. And I got to the airport June 30th, IAH, and got my phone. And I remember turning around to my wife. I said, all right, I'm about to turn it all off. I deleted my email. I deleted my Slack, and I turned off my cell service for 31 days. No access to me. Now, my wife had her phone on, so we taught our kids and all that kind of stuff, but no access to me.
This is
My
the
only
Morocco
challenge to
trip.
our
Is this
team-
the Morocco trip?
No, that just happened 2 weeks ago. This was
Okay.
2 years ago. So this is
Okay.
the first big time we did it. This was 31 days. And the only charge to the team was try to grow the business by one client while I'm gone. If you can just grow the business by one client. And so we lost a couple, gained a few, and they grew the business by one client. Fast forward, we left for about 2 weeks last year. Same thing, no cell service. I just got back last week at the time of this recording. My wife and I went to Morocco for 2 weeks. Same deal. Deleted everything, no cell service. Did call a couple of our team members just to like show them what we were doing because we're friends. Like, hey, my gosh, look at this camel. This thing's amazing. And so we were over there doing it. Got back. They had grown the business by 4 clients in the 2 weeks that I was gone. And so they have now proven to me, and it's a challenge for them. I got back and one of our guys was like, we talked to each other that while you were gone, we were going to grow this thing. Like they take it as a personal challenge at that point. Jessie, one of our longest term team members, she's been with me almost since the beginning. She said, I want you to leave every year because it just restokes this ownership that we've got in there that you can do this. And so it's not that you can't sell a business, it's that you can't sell a job. And so if you've got a business, that means everything's outside of your head. It's documented, it's captured. Other people are running it and they might be running it like you, but they might be running it like them too. That's okay because they evolve in that. But it's running and the mission is being accomplished. We can sell that business. Whether you're in custom homes, you're an ice cream shop, you're a hotel, it doesn't matter what you are. The business we cannot sell is where everything's bottled up in Mark Williams' head and we can't get it out. Why? I don't want to buy you. When I buy your business, I don't want you hanging around for 5 years. And Mark, you don't want to hang around for 5 years because guess who your boss is going to be? And you're not going to like him at that point. And so that's not a sellable asset. And if you sell on an earnout, they're going to put sales figures on you for the 5 years of earnout that you got to be there that is going to make your life miserable for those next 5 years. And you're going to wonder, why did I do this in the first place? And so the reality is, if you can just start working, and people ask, how long does it take? Something on average, if you give yourself about 1.5 to 2.5 years, somewhere in that range, can take a business from just running out of Mark's head into a full scale, not a full self-managing company like Dan Sullivan talks about, but it's far more self-managing than it was. A full self-managing company is, I'm not here at all. And that's what we call a legacy business.
How often would be, so let's just say you have two business strategies. One is to help people. To me, they kind of go hand in hand. Like, could I really sell the business without working with Business on Purpose to get all these systems in place? First of all, my question is, how often do people call you and say, you know what, Scott, I'd love to sell my business in 3 years. How do I get there? And then how often, let's say somebody like myself, where I'd say, hey, I want to improve this. I'm not looking at selling anytime soon, but I want that down the road at some point. What's your percent split on those two questions?
I'd say probably it's got to be 50-50. If I'm stumped that much, it's got to be a 50-50.
That's pretty high. That's a lot. Okay, that's a lot higher than I would have thought it for the exit strategy.
I think more importantly, Mark, the question that people get is they come with an exit planning question and they honestly just don't know what they're asking. That's usually what we get.
Because you really, am I wrong? You have to do both. Exit strategy really is the first strategy. Building the structures and the teams and the accountability and the vision story and all that stuff. And a lot of us have a lot of it in our head. I think the magic here, and I think a lot of us, I know, like, sometimes my team has rebelled, like, guys, we just need to write it all out. And some of their comments are like, why? We don't really want to read it. And so trying to figure out a way to systemize it in a way that everyone else is going to adopt it. And I know, and we don't have time, we're out of time now, but to talk about the culture calendar and some of that stuff. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, it usually what we tell people, if you're looking to exit your business at any time, 8 to 10 years is a good runway. That gives you plenty of time to systematize the thing, gives you plenty of time to asset protect. Remember, there's a whole nother layer of asset protection and all that stuff that you kind of got to get into with those advisors that you talked to earlier. And then there's the actual sell and the due diligence. That can usually be 1 to 2 years if you go through it. Due diligence alone's usually 6 to 12 months based on what you want to do. But we're also seeing a lot of people start to ESOP, or at least consider an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. And that's a really interesting take. If you start to do, we have no time to talk about that because that's a very elongated discussion. But the reality is, it's a great way to incentivize the people on the team to take chips off the table for the owner, but still maintain control of the owner so that they can maintain the vision of where the company's going.
Well, we'll bring you back on maybe third or fourth quarter because I think two things. One is I want to talk a lot about email and how that process would look like to actually do that. And then the second would be we can talk ESOP. So I'll make a note.
Great.
I'll see you next week at IBS. And by the time this airs, it will have already passed. Thanks again for coming on. We'll have everything on the show notes.
Great questions.
And like always, I enjoy our time together. And thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.